Sheltered homelessness are off the charts, even in comparison with our peer cities. That's why today I'm announcing that I have transmitted 3 pieces of legislation to our city council that will allow us to quickly open new shelters with supportive services across the city. Together with this legislation and your support, we're going to make sure we're matching the right services to the right people, including for people struggling with behavioral health and substance use issues. We're going to work with philanthropic partners to identify additional funds to further accelerate our efforts. And we're going to make sure that neighbors have a way to offer their feedback and support.
Wilson left before the event ended and before anybody could ask for more details.
Well, this is rare for me, but I got beat. Mayor Wilson quickly snuck out in the back and I didn't even notice. Sure. I'm just wondering what happened to the mayor. Where'd she go?
She had to go. She is so busy. She's the mayor.
Well, how come she didn't take any reporter questions?
That was never the plan. She was announcing her announcement, and we'll send her the rest of the details for you shortly.
Pretty much all of Seattle's mainstream media is here, all the TV stations, local papers, and none of them could ask Mayor Katie Wilson questions. And there are still so many unanswered questions. For example, she talks about 1,000 shelters. Out of these shelters, how many are going to be tiny homes? What other types of shelters are going to be offered? Then there is the question about the so-called service resistant. This is the vast majority of men and women right now on the streets. They're the people who are refusing all the shelter options and even tiny houses being offered, and they'll only take full-blown, fully furnished studios and apartments.
Well, we are committed to getting things right.
I've now covered 3 administrations, including Jenny Durkin, Bruce Harrell, and now Katie Wilson. And this is the first time in quite some time that a sitting mayor took off through the back without answering any reporter questions at a press conference. I wonder why. Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson bragged about delaying an encampment sweep so she could place several homeless people into shelter and housing, implying this would be a new way of getting people off the streets.
There I talked with a woman who was 5 months sober and had 3 small dogs. We were able to identify a spot for her in a tiny house village.
But after Wilson's State of the City address last week, We Heart Seattle's Andrea Suarez did a simple follow-up.
People don't always accept the services they're referred to
see if that woman with 3 dogs actually made it off the streets.
Oh, no.
Surrounded by drug paraphernalia and a sense of despair, Crystal Rawlings and her dogs are still living in a Ballard tent encampment.
I'm not going to be ungrateful for anything.
She spoke to me exclusively and says the city offered her a tiny house in Interbay Village.
I just thought that something big in the works was bigger than a tiny home.
It's run by the Low Income Housing Institute, one of the many nonprofits contracted by the city for homeless services.
I'm not going to have them breathing in that mold.
However, Rawlings claims Unit 71
I don't understand why they let anyone move into it, because it's like, just look, you'll see.
Was infested with dangerous black mold that can cause serious health risks like severe allergies and breathing problems.
Wow, that's black mold.
I personally visited this tiny house to verify her claims.
Not only that, it's filthy. It's disgusting.
While I was unable to get inside the unit, I did see what appeared to be mold spores growing on the window frame.
Ask us. Come out here and deal with us personally.
I thought she did that, though, already.
No, she just came out here and had conversated just like me and you.
Rawlings says the city and Lehigh did not offer her any alternatives.
You want her to watch the whole process.
Yes, because if she would have done that, then she would know what's working and what's not working for us.
Our teams also helped 5 more people living at that encampment.
And when she saw the mayor taking a victory lap on stage, Rawlings says she was absolutely incensed.
Why did you use me as an example? And that's not an example. The city does that all the time. Whenever there's a tiny home available, they give it to one of us.
Feeling used and betrayed.
In fairness to the mayor, she did offer you a place to go.
There's a big difference between being housed and then being in a shelter.
In other words, Rawlings claims she was promised a fully furnished apartment, not a wooden shack.
And we cannot just keep moving people from place to place.
I reached out to Mayor Wilson's office in Lehigh for comment, but so far no response.
So check this out. Even mainstream media is basically saying, hey, we thought we were going to be able to ask some questions here. Mayor Wilson announces shelter plan and then avoids questions on details because she is sprinting away. She is a runner. She's going to not answer any questions. And why is that? Why are we avoiding? You call a press conference, most of Seattle, my understanding, most of Seattle's media was there to ask about this 1,000-bed homelessness deal. If we thought that more shelter was the answer, don't you think we just build it? Yeah. It doesn't work. Whole thing does not work. It's just an absolute house of cards that will never even get built. It's a no-go. It's a hard no-go. You need to involve law enforcement like what they're doing down in San Francisco. Hey, you can't stay here. Gonna have to sweep you. And so you sweep people? Okay, all right. Eventually they will move to Portland, and then Portland will have to deal with it. You know what I mean? And all these folks that are in the encampments, they've already got housing. Vast majority of them already have housing. They just like to do drugs in our public parks, in the streets, in the sidewalks. Oh, I'm just going to set up a tent here. And then the ones that are in the encampments that are not accepting housing, that's a real problem. You've got a whole bunch of people that are like, yeah, I'll take a 2-bedroom, condo, but anything less than that, I'm a hard no-go. Yeah, tiny home, no, yeah. Because they know they can work the system, and they're going to get a bunch of free stuff. And they love doing drugs in a homeless encampment. Why go anywhere else when the city has basically said, yep, you can be here, you can do your thing. So when Cairo indicates in the title, Mayor Wilson announces shelter plan, avoids questions on details, that's when you know, okay, yeah, this isn't just a Jonathan Cho, a Brandy Cruz, Andrea Suarez issue. This is hey, what are you doing, Mayor? Well, the mayor's in way over her head. She can't control homelessness. She's got the World Cup coming. It's an absolute train wreck, and it's unfolding in front of our eyes. I went to the Kraken last night, and in the shadow of the Jimi Hendrix, the Paul Allen Jimi Hendrix Center, which isn't called Jimi Hendrix Center because of the lawsuit back and forth. You've literally it's in the shadow during the daytime of the Seattle Space Needle. You got a bunch of tents. You just got, we're going to camp here. It's just a bunch of tents right outside the Climate Pledge Arena. What a ridiculous name. We don't need an arena called Climate Pledge. Oh, we're so virtue signaling. It's Climate Pledge. Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson announced that she's going to add 1,000 shelter beds to a homeless community in Seattle that doesn't accept them. Yeah, they don't do shelter. They don't do shelter because it's a bunch of other whacked out nut jobs on drugs that just take advantage of each other. They steal their shit. They physically assault each other. They sexually assault each other. They have dogs. Just this whole thing. I need to bring my dog. Okay, well, shelter ain't going to work. To lessen the city's homelessness crisis, you need to deal with it head on. You got to involve law enforcement. And law enforcement right now in Seattle is being tasked with looking out for ICE. Because Lord knows ICE is, law enforcement tasked with interfering with other law enforcement. That's why Seattle Mayor, absolute train wreck, will get nowhere, will get nothing done. This plan won't work. It's just doomed from the get-go. And that's why she's running away, not answering questions. Because she doesn't have any. He has no answers. We got to do something. Got to throw something out there. But details on how that will all be executed, the 1,000 shelter beds to lessen the homeless. How many thousand people do we have in Washington State or Seattle that are homeless, that are unhoused, that are out there? More than 1,000, right? And that will all be executed and paid for or scanned. Details. Yeah, we got nothing. Wilson says she wants to lean heavily on tiny home villages, introducing legislation to ease the permitting for those sites. So we're just going to have a state riddled with homeless tiny shelters. No thanks. Pass. You ever been around those? Did you see the footage with the black mold? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And those things are fairly new. Relative to, homes that I look at as an appraiser or sell. If you have a tiny home from 1962, what do you think that looks like? Not tasty. Reduce restrictions around their size and encourage Seattleites to volunteer at one of the places that make the homes. For many years and through multiple mayor administrations, we have not treated this crisis with the urgency that it demands because you're not dealing with it head on. You're not saying, hey, you can't stay here. because we've got a bunch of libtards running Seattle. You see that guy talking to Jonathan Cho at the beginning? Just all smiles and saying, it's great having you here, Jonathan. But then says in the other, the typical liberal Democrat says on one hand, it's great, you're doing a great job. And then you're not a real reporter. I mean, that is so standard. That is so typical of the douchebaggery of the retards who run Seattle. That is Seattle in a nutshell. That's what I'm surrounded with. When I go to a Kraken match, I am surrounded with people like, that can't work their way out of a wet paper bag. I mean, and that guy couldn't either. So Wilson is forwarding 3 pieces of legislation in an effort to move more quickly. It never happened. First would allow the city to enter its leases into more easily. Who cares? Another bill would allocate $4.5 million, money wasted of DHS funding. Wilson says is unspent, though her staff said it's not enough to cover the entire plan. Last piece increases the size of tiny home villages from 100 to 150. Oh, that's great. So you're just going to have communities where people run around with swords and deal drugs and, not necessarily in the tiny homes, but just right outside. I mean, the number of people in these homeless communities that commit crimes just outside is phenomenal. It's like, what's going on? Men are being raped? Yeah, okay. But don't talk about that. Let's talk about the success story. And the success story being the video at the beginning of this video, where the woman is being told she's going to get a house, going to get a tiny house or whatever, studio, whatever. And she doesn't. She's back in the tent. Shocker. The announcement was held at the Low Income Housing Institute, the LIHI, which currently does not operate a village with more than 74 people. Even the most successful shelters that do the best work and have the best relationships in their communities are currently limited to just serving 100 people. This is a very low limit, which is out of step with national best practices in what cities like LA, Tampa, and Austin are doing. Why don't you ask Oklahoma City what they're doing? Relentless enforcement of the law. Yeah, you can't stay here. You can't be in a tent just living on the street. That's a no-go. We'll take you to jail. Seattle doesn't have any balls to enforce that kind of thing. It's a bunch of wet noodle limp dicks running around. They're like, we got a plan. And it just doesn't go anywhere. And you're left with, that's not a shocker. So when you compare to places like LA, Tampa, and Austin, all right. Tampa, maybe. Austin, hell no. LA, hell no. And it just doesn't make sense when we have so many people sleeping outside with nowhere to go. It's not that you don't have people sleeping outside with nowhere to go. They don't want to go anywhere else. And they're refusing shelter and they want to keep doing drugs. And you're allowing them to do that. If you just laid down the law and said, nope, no can do. Where would you like to go? You just got to keep that going. And people will eventually leave because you shuffle them. I mean, we see video after video after video of the tents going from one side of the street to the other. They come back in a few hours. And guess what? The sweep team is already on to their next tent encampment sweep. They're on the go. There's so many in Seattle. And that's what happens when you have weak liberal leadership. Weak liberal leadership. Liberals can't work their way literally out of a wet paper bag from Trader Joe's. They can't. How do we get out of here? Man who only wanted to be identified as Warren said there's who cares? He and several other people living near the villages say they would support the expansion. Okay. These people are on crack, right? I think anything we can do to help the housing problem. It's not a housing problem. It's a drug problem, folks. You got a drug problem. Nobody wants to talk about it. If we just had some more housing. No, it's not that. And you know what the way you can tell that? Is go to a homeless encampment right now and you tell me it's a housing problem. Go there. Hang out. Better yet, set up a tent, spend the night there. And you let me know how that experience goes. Right? You hear the women screaming in the middle of the night, pretty common. Yeah, wonder what's happening. What is going on? Oh, we have a housing problem. No. I think that, let's see what else we got here. Here we go. Here's the good stuff. Mayor Wilson left the announcement before the speakers had finished and before taking any questions. All right. The optics on that are just horrific. Now, what you could say is, yeah, but Sean, you're going to rip into her one way or the other. Well, if you got bad policy and you're pushing bad policy out there that isn't going to work, that we all know isn't going to work, I'm going to rip. That's what I do. Right? Exposing the ridiculousness for what it is. Cairo 7 had hoped to ask Wilson questions about outstanding details, like what throughput, housing placement goals, what defines a successful shelter, what would qualify for expansion, what new sites are being explored, what outreach has been done in potential areas, and what the final cost is today. You know what Mayor Wilson is doing? She is really busy enacting 600 signs being placed through Seattle's public spaces saying that ICE isn't allowed to enforce the law. So that is how you get situations like this. Decades of terrible leadership going nowhere, ending in policy that's just horrific. And then all the folks in power look around and go, oh, God, what do we do? Well, let's increase it from 100 to 150. Just nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Do something that actually makes a difference. You know what I mean? Just shock me. Come up with policy that makes a difference. And you know why we can't do that in Seattle? Because nothing can be logical and nothing can be tough love. We can't have any of these whacked out homeless drug addicts having their civil rights being violated, right? Can't have that. Oh, we can't have that. Instead, we just allow them to die in a tent, in a park, where Seattle constituents can't take their children, their grandchildren. They themselves can't enjoy it just because it's an absolute train wreck. So tell me how that makes sense. Well, we can't violate their civil rights. You put yourself out there as the leader and CEO of our city to be able to answer questions on the fly and prove to the public, build trust that you do know what you're doing. Andrea Suarez, the founder and director of We Heart Seattle, an organization, yada, yada. Suarez has worked with people at the Ballard encampment Wilson visited earlier and disputes the mayor's claims that their homelessness was solved. It's a revolving door. It's just back and forth, back and forth. And until you really drop the hammer and involve police, and in Seattle, you don't have enough cops. You're shy, 600 police officers? Because at the heart of the matter, socialists hate cops. Defund the police. Same retards that go with defund the police. Same retards that do the whole no kings, no kings. It's just delusional. It's like men can have babies. It's that kind of delusion, right? That trans women are actually women. Absolute mental illness delusion. It just is, right? Biological differences. So what I heard today was from the old guard, Andrea Suarez, which has been in place for decades during this emergency. And the emergency has gotten worse, Suarez said. Well, it's one of those things where it's not going to fix itself, is it? No, you're going to have a very, very dedicated, tough love approach. And guess what? Seattle doesn't have the balls to do it. And with a socialist in charge, literally no balls. Just saying, just none whatsoever. So expect this to get worse. Expect this to just become more of a train wreck. And expect to see more incidents like this where the mayor isn't going to answer the tough questions because she never had any real answers to begin with. So how's that going to work out? I don't know. But hey, let's bring the FIFA World Cup to Seattle and we'll see what happens. I'll podcast as well. Thanks so much for being here. Love to have you subscribe. Hit that notification bell. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye for now.